The screen flickered to life across every civilized world, from the neon-lit spires of core planets to the dust-ridden colonies on the rim. A towering execution platform loomed under artificial daylight, a grotesque monolith of metal and wire. Suspended above it, a vast array of nooses swayed in the stale air, each prepared for the condemned. The numbers were staggering. 60,000 souls stood in silence, their wrists bound, their fates already decided. A figure stepped forward, draped in the regal blue of the Galactic Council. His elongated face bore no expression, his luminous eyes betraying neither satisfaction nor remorse. Supreme Chancellor Valen, the architect of order, regarded the camera with an air of finality. These are the consequences of defiance. His voice, layered with synthetic distortion, echoed through every device tuned to the broadcast. Rebellion festers in lawlessness. Justice is absolute. The prisoners remain still. Some murmured quiet prayers to distant gods. Others stood with defiant chins, their bodies trembling but unbroken. Among them were warriors, scholars, and civilians alike. Men who had once served, built, and bled for their worlds, now condemned for crimes as vague as insubordination. In the control deck of the UHS Ironclad, General Alexander Grant watched, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles ached. Around him, his officers were frozen in various states of horror and disbelief. The room was silent save for the monotonous hum of machinery, the broadcast feeding directly into their command holoscreens. Are we just going to sit here? The voice belonged to Captain Eric Voss. His fists curled atop the console. He was younger, brasher than Grant, but no less disciplined. His sharp eyes flicked toward the general, seeking an answer. Grant did not immediately respond. His gaze remained locked onto the screen, onto the rows of doomed men. His breathing was steady, but his hands, scarred from decades of combat, tensed over the edge of the console. The broadcast continued. The Supreme Chancellor gestured with a thin, bony hand, and a mechanical chime rang out. The platform beneath the prisoners began to shift, adjusting their ranks into perfect symmetry. By the authority of the Galactic Council, Valen proclaimed, sentence is carried out. A second chime. The floor dropped. 60,000 bodies fell as one. Gasps rippled through the ironclad's command deck. Some officers averted their eyes. Others watched, transfixed, as the camera panned across the mass execution. The nooses snapped taut, jerking heads to unnatural angles. A few struggled, legs kicking against the void, their final moments spent in agony. The weaker ropes gave way first, sending lifeless bodies tumbling into the abyss below. Then, without ceremony, the feed cut to black. For a long moment, there was only silence. Grant exhaled slowly, forcing his pulse to steady. The rage that coiled in his chest was a familiar one, tempered by years of war, but never before had it burned quite like this. He turned to his officers, taking in the barely restrained fury written across their faces. They just murdered 60,000 men, Colonel Damian Stroud said, his voice low and even, but his fingers twitched against the grip of his sidearm. On live broadcast. No trial. No defense. Voss shook his head. That was a damn spectacle. That was a warning. Grant's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He straightened, his imposing frame casting a long shadow beneath the dim lights of the deck. And they expect us to do nothing. Stroud scoffed. We're supposed to, aren't we? Condemn it with words, send a diplomatic protest, and pretend like this is just another tragedy we're too weak to stop. Grant finally turned from the blank holoscreen, his expression hard as steel. They think humanity will kneel, that we'll accept their rule, no matter how many they butcher. He let the weight of the words settle before speaking again. Quieter now. They're wrong. A murmur of agreement rippled through the deck, quiet but resolute. Even those who had a moment ago been paralyzed by horror now stood a little taller, the fire of defiance reigniting in their chests. A sharp beeping cut through the air, a priority transmission from the United Earth Federation. Grant knew what it would say before he even answered. The politicians would urge restraint. They would insist that humanity could not afford war with the Council, that no matter the crime, retaliation would bring nothing but destruction. Grant accepted the transmission, and as the formal voices of UF officials filled the air, He already knew he wouldn't listen. The warship hung in the void, silent as a grave. From the bridge of the UHS Ironclad, General Alexander Grant studied the distant shape of Varen Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council's dominion. A pristine world of silver spires and orbital defenses. It had never known invasion. No enemy had dared. Until now, inside the command deck, the air was thick with anticipation. Officers stood at their stations, waiting, watching. This was no ordinary mission, no sanctioned retaliation. This was an act of defiance, a declaration that humanity would not be cowed by slaughter. Grant folded his arms behind his back, his gaze unwavering. Status on the stealth systems? Commander Leon Graves, the ship's chief engineer, barely looked up from his console. Holding. We're still ghosts. That was their advantage. Humanity had spent decades perfecting electronic warfare and stealth technology, refining it beyond anything the Council had encountered. Their fleets relied on overwhelming force and sheer presence. They had never considered that a warship could simply slip through their defenses unseen. Captain Eric Voss leaned over his station, adjusting the targeting relays. Once we fire, they'll know we're here. They'll know, Grant agreed, but they won't have time to do a damn thing about it. The holoscreen displayed the targets. Key defense installations, planetary communication hubs, the very infrastructure that allowed the Council to wield its power. A single, precise strike could cripple them, leave them exposed to the coming storm. Colonel Damian Stroud stood at Grant's side, his voice low. We still go straight for the Chancellor? Grant didn't hesitate. We go straight for the Chancellor. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken resolve. Then Grant gave the order. The Ironclad unleashed hell. Silent missiles streaked through the darkness, slipping past scanning field before detonating in eruptions of fire and shattered metal. The orbital platforms, once a wall of unbreakable defense, crumbled in an instant. Shock waves rippled across the surface of Varen Prime as the planetary shield collapsed, leaving the city below vulnerable. Panic erupted. Sirens blared. The Council, arrogant in its belief that no force would ever dare challenge it, scrambled to respond. But it was already too late. Ground teams go. The strike force deployed in rapid succession, drop pods cutting through the atmosphere, trailing fire as they descended upon the capital. Grant and his officers moved with them, landing amidst the chaos. Soldiers spilled from the pods, weapons at the ready, cutting through the Chancellor's elite guards with brutal efficiency. Stroud led the charge through the outer perimeter, moving like a predator through the battlefield. He was relentless, precise, every shot a death sentence. Voss, at his flank, coordinated movements with the efficiency of machine, directing teams to the crumbling defenses. Grant pushed forward, his rifle steady in his grip. The halls of the Council chambers were lined with intricate murals, depicting the supposed unity of the galaxy under their rule. The sight only fueled his resolve. A group of alien guards rounded the corner, weapons raised. Grant fired first. Plasma rounds seared through the air, finding their marks before the enemy could react. Bodies fell. Smoke curled against the walls. They pressed onward, deeper into the structure, toward the grand chamber where justice awaited. When they breached the final doors, Supreme Chancellor Valen was already waiting. The alien ruler stood at the top of the dais, his robes immaculate despite the carnage unfolding around him. His luminous eyes flickered, taking in the human soldiers with something resembling amusement. Behind him, the remaining council members cowered, their arrogance shattered. Grant stepped forward, lowering his rifle but not his guard. Valen tilted his head. You've come for revenge. Grant's voice was cold. I've come for justice. The Chancellor exhaled, the sound almost resembling a laugh. And you believe this will change anything? That the galaxy will see you as liberators rather than butchers? Stroud raised his weapon. They'll see exactly what you made us. Valen's expression did not change. Then do it. Grant did not hesitate. The shot rang out, sharp and final. Valen crumpled, his body folding in on itself as dark blood spread across the pristine floor. The remaining council members screamed, but their voices were swallowed by gunfire as the soldiers executed them where they stood. It was over. Grant turned to his men. Broadcast it. Within moments, the footage was transmitted across the galaxy, the same way the executions had been, the same way the Council had tried to instill fear. Only now, it was their turn to be afraid. The execution of Supreme Chancellor Valen and the annihilation of the Galactic Council spread across the stars like wildfire. The same worlds that had once trembled beneath the Council's rule now bore witness to its downfall. The same screens that had displayed 60,000 deaths now broadcast the justice humanity had delivered. Some saw it as vengeance, others as liberation. But no one could deny that the balance of power had shifted. Aboard the UHS Ironclad, General Alexander Grant stood at the bridge, staring at the vastness of space beyond the viewport. The weight of what they had done settled on his shoulders, not as guilt, but as responsibility. He had shattered the old order. What came next was uncertain. Behind him, Colonel Damian Stroud exhaled, arms crossed as he watched the latest intelligence reports flood the holoscreens. It's starting. Grant didn't need to look. He already knew. The moment the Council fell, the fractures began. Council-controlled sectors erupted into chaos. Former allies turned on each other. Entire species, long subjugated, seized the opportunity to rise against their oppressors. Some hailed humanity as saviors. Others cursed them for plunging the galaxy into anarchy. Captain Eric Voss stood at his station, monitoring encrypted transmissions. We've got multiple factions reaching out. Rebel groups, planetary leaders, even some former Council officers looking to switch sides. He glanced back at Grant. They want to know what we're going to do. That was the question, wasn't it? The Council was dead, but its absence had left a void. And nature abhorred a vacuum. Stroud scoffed, shaking his head. We gave them the push. It's their fight now. Voss frowned. That's not how they see it. The moment we executed Valen, we became more than just another military force. We became a symbol. Like it or not, they're looking to us for leadership. Grant remained silent, processing the enormity of it all. The United Earth Federation had authorized nothing. This war had been fought on his command alone. And yet, the consequences stretched far beyond a single battle. Humanity, once a secondary power in the galactic order, had become something else entirely. A notification chimed, pulling their attention back to the holoscreens. A transmission request, secure, high priority. The origin was unknown, but the encryption was sophisticated. Whoever was reaching out wasn't some desperate warlord or opportunistic politician. Grant gestured for Voss to put it through. The screen flickered, resolving into the image of an alien unlike any they had faced before. His features were sharp, predatory, but his bearing was measured. His voice, when it came, was smooth, deliberate. I am High Commander Orzel of the Varzen Dominion. I speak for those who seek order in the chaos you have unleashed. He leaned forward slightly. Your actions have changed everything, General Grant. But the war is far from over. Stroud narrowed his eyes. And what exactly do you want? Orzel regarded him with something almost like amusement before his gaze returned to Grant, to see if humanity is prepared to lead. A heavy silence followed. The bridge crew waited, breath held, as if the fate of the galaxy rested on the next word spoken. Grant exhaled slowly. He had spent a lifetime following orders, fighting battles dictated by others. But now there was no one above him, no higher authority to appeal to. The choice was his, and he already knew his answer. He met Orzel's gaze, his voice steady, unyielding. Then let's find out.